Okay, welcome everyone to the April edition of the owasp-dependencycheck community meeting. We have a full agenda. So who is going to present first? Is that you, Nicholas?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let us just quickly go over the very small agenda for today. First, project updates as usual. I will do that part. Then I will hand over to Vinod, who will say a few things about contributing to Hyades or Dependency-Track version 5.x. Then we will get a few insights from Vulncon, from both Melba and Steve. And last but not least, as usual, the Q&A, where you get the chance to ask us questions, but also ask each other questions or whatever have you. It's free time or free for all, essentially. Directly starting with the project updates, so with 4.11 being imminent, promised, what we thought we would do today is to quickly show a few highlights of this release and also like give a quick insight, quick demo of a few of these. Of course, they will also be in the change logs as usual in the upgrade notes, but still, so that just that you have seen them once. First up is the validation of uploaded bombs against the cyclone-dx schema. You may or may not have noticed that this is currently missing in Dependency-Track. So if you upload an invalid cyclone-dx bomb to DT, you will not get immediate feedback as a user. Instead, like processing is asynchronous, so asynchronous processing goes on. It will fail in the background, but you who has uploaded the SBOM will not know about it. And that is an unfortunate situation that we recognized. So now we added validation. That said, we also know that there are tools that will generate non-compliant cyclone-dx bombs. And that is kind of to be expected at this point because there was no prior validation, right? So what will work at the moment may not work once validation is enabled. So what we did is we enabled it per default, but if you run into issues, for example, your pipelines start failing, you will have the ability to disable this globally via environment variable. And again, this will be in the change logs, but it is enabled per default. Also, validating against the schema kind of requires the schema to be available. And cyclone-dx version 1.6 is to be released soon-ish, in a few days, or I think a week. I may be lying here. So there may be some tools that generate these bombs quite quickly or quite soon as well. And for 4.11, you will not be able to import them to DT. The good news is if validation is enabled, you will know about it up front, right? DT will scream at you saying, hey, this is not a valid schema that I can recognize. We will add support for 1.6 in the next release when the tooling for it is available. Then we also optimize the bomb ingestion itself, so the asynchronous processing. It is now more efficient, it is faster, and it is also atomic, which means if the processing for some reason fails halfway through, it will not leave behind any partial state, like for example, a partially imported bomb. It will fail either completely or not at all. Also, it's now doing deduplication in memory before even touching the database, which will have a slightly different behavior when it comes to actually deduplicating. We had multiple issues about this in the past that this now resolves. However, due to this change in deduplication, there may be some differences as to what actually is presented in DT when you import a bomb. So we decided to do this or to implement this feature as an opt-in feature for this release, just so that if you run into any differences that break workflows for you, you can still, again, fall back to the old implementation and hopefully let us know if you run into issues so we can fix those. I asked for feedback on this multiple times in the Slack. I got a few responses for it. Some people tested it, but really, we would love to have more confidence on this before we enable this per default. But still, we are confident that this is a better implementation of the bomb ingestion, and we would highly encourage you to enable it. Also, there was a long-standing problem where you could not import bombs that contained package URLs that were longer than 255 characters. And there are, like, this is a database schema limitation. And there are certain tools that generate pearls that are quite long because they use qualifiers that include the VCS URL, for example, the download URL, hashes potentially. So it's quite easy to get over the limit of 255. And there are some things to consider when it comes to different database management systems and the indices on these columns. So we found that a length of 786 is a good middle ground between the current limit that has limitations for certain tools and potentially a more optimal 1024 characters, or even no upper limit at all. And this particularly will help with tools like c-scrm and Node NPM or CDX-Gen, which are tools that currently generate long pearls occasionally. Also, there's now a global audit view. We talked about this a few times already, but never showed it. I will do that in a moment. And this essentially gives you a bird's eye read-only, read-only is important here, view of vulnerabilities across all your projects. And you are able to filter, for example, by severity, by CVSS score. And also you can have a grouped view that says this and this vulnerability affects so and so many projects. Again, I will demonstrate that in a moment. And there's also a feature planned corresponding to this for policy violations. So there will not only be a version of this for vulnerabilities, but also, again, violations. And this was a contribution from the community, particularly Ralph and Richard from M&M Software. They also contributed lots of other stuff in the past, for example, the improved dependency graph. So much appreciated, and thanks for your contribution. On that note, also Trivy integration, a highly awaited feature, which leverages a central Trivy instance, like Trivy as a server mode that you can use with local Trivy instances. And Dependency-Track basically does the same as other Trivy instances and just leverages this central server. And this was contributed also by someone from the community. Thanks to Martin from Backbase for that one. And before we go to the next slide, I would like to, let me see, does this work if I pull this to another screen? Do you still see my browser? Yes, no?
Yes.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, so what I wanted to demonstrate first is the bomb validation, right? Let's call this invalid123. Just so you see how this will behave on the front end. I'm going to upload a, let me see. An invalid bomb. Let's use this one. Okay, this is one of the c-scrm examples that are obviously invalid. And when you upload or try to upload this, you get immediate feedback now. Note how this only says schema validation failed. The reason the front end is displaying it like this is because you could just as well upload a 30 megabyte bomb or even larger, right? And if there are multiple errors in this, we have no screen real estate to display this for you. And that being said, validation errors are returned by the API. So if you have an API client that uses the bomb upload endpoints, you will get this information, you will get multiple errors. For example, here we have one error and there's the explicit error detail. So again, just for your interest, if you have clients, you can use this information in the front end. It will not be displayed right now. We will look for a way to make this more digestible for actual users so even they can get more information as to why their bomb was invalid. And you will get similar error messages when you do not upload valid XML or JSON, or when the schema version is not recognized. So this is for the bomb validation part. And then I mentioned the global audit view, right? So there's the new entry here in the admin menu. And you have two tabs in this overview. It looks a bit crowded, and that's because there are many things to filter on, right? The main view here is a table where you can currently see I'm in the vulnerabilities by occurrence. So these are individual vulnerabilities across your portfolio. And you can have obviously many columns here that you can display. I disabled a few of them so it's easier to digest at one glance. And you can like filter on the severity, for example, only show me high and medium, or only show me medium vulnerabilities, or only show me those that I have not yet audited or that are exploitable. At the moment, I do not have any exploitable or marked as exploitable vulnerabilities. And the same also for date ranges for published and attributed on. So when was the vulnerability reported to me? You can search across multiple like text fields if you want. And you can also, of course, filter by CVSS score. For example, let's say I only want from 5.5 to 7.5. So this is what I get. And again, this across the entire portfolio, this will get crowded the more projects you have. And this also works with the portfolio ICL. So if you have the portfolio ICL enabled and the user views this page that only has access to certain projects, they will of course only see the aggregates of those projects he has access to. So that is the first view here. And then we have group vulnerabilities where you have a even more bird's eye view, let's say. And you can see here, it tells you how many projects are being affected by this specific vulnerability. And this quite simply gives you a nice overview over like the most high profile vulnerabilities across your portfolio. And it also can help you in like remediation efforts as to where do you need to focus next. Because again, you have the same filters, CVSS scores, occurrences by project, also from to severities, publish date, etc., text search. And this, of course, can be extended in the future as well to include more fields and more filters. Yep. Again, this will also come for the policy violations. This is currently in review, a pull request for it, also from the same contributors as this entire feature here. Moving on, for the Trivy integration, how you can enable Trivy in 4.11 is just, it is another section here in the analyzers next to owasp-index, vulndb, and sneak. And the way this works is you just provide a URL to the central Trivy instance. In this case, I have Trivy deployed in the same Docker Compose project as Dependency-Track itself. So I can just reference it by its service name. There is an optional token that you can provide, so not everyone can access the Trivy API. And you can also optionally decide to ignore vulnerabilities that have no known fixes. Trivy has this functionality. We can leverage this as well. Oh, right. So what I did here is, for demonstration purposes, I disabled owasp-index. So if I now were to create the project for Dependency-Track itself, I think it's version 4.8.0. And if I command tooltip. Great. Okay, give me a second. Yep. Okay, I just uploaded the BOM for Dependency-Track 4.8.0. Components were ingested and findings are here. And you see these are all from Trivy and not from owasp-index. So kind of works as advertised. There is one minor thing that we are still working on for this to be released. But in the end, it already works quite well. And Trivy has a bigger coverage than owasp-index because it also ingests like vulnerability databases from Red Hat and multiple Linux distributions. So the coverage for operating system packages is a lot better than from owasp-index. Yeah, I think that is what I wanted to show here for now. So continuing with what is left, I mentioned there's something left for Trivy to be done, namely the support for component properties. At the moment, Dependency-Track does not ingest component properties. And Trivy is using properties to communicate alternative package names. For example, for operating system packages, it uses properties to, for example, provide glibc as an alternative name for libc6. And without these properties or without forwarding them to Trivy, it may miss a few findings. And obviously, when we integrate Trivy, you want to do it properly. That's why this is still outstanding. And this is pretty much the last thing for 4.11 that is pending. Also, we have now an official Helm chart. It is not quite yet production ready, at least from our perspective, but it is there. It is on GitHub, and you can use it if you want. But mostly we are interested in feedback. So if you have experience with Helm charts, if you have opinions about Helm charts, if you have special needs for Helm charts in your organization, please have a look and please tell us, or please raise PRs for it if there is something that you need us to support. So once we have a bit more community feedback, we will mark this as stable and it will then be ready to be used. Yeah, so the current Helm chart only covers Dependency-Track version 4.x, so the current version. Once this is done and once this is properly signed off by the community, we will also start working on providing one for Dependency-Track version 5.x or Hyades. Yup. Organizational changes. So this might be interesting. The copyright for Dependency-Track has previously been assigned to Steve Springett, the original creator and author of Dependency-Track. And he has decided, or brought up, that the copyright should be transferred to the OWASP Foundation. And while that for many probably won't have an impact, it's, from our perspective, it's the right thing to do, and it kind of undermines the commitment to OWASP as a foundation and to Dependency-Track being an open project of the community, right? So what we did is we switched out all the copyright statements across all the repositories we have to mention OWASP Foundation instead of Steve Springett. And again, thanks, Steve, for proposing it and of course for approving it as well. Much, much appreciated. Also from the issue management perspective, we are making an effort to label more issues as good first issues so that contributors that are new to the project have a bit more choice as to what they want to do. So whenever a new issue is raised now, or we come across older issues that we respond to, we really make an effort to label them as good first issue if it is a good fit. And we already see people working on those issues actively. So I think it's already paying off quite well. On a similar note, what we also decided to do is we will label issues with rough effort estimates. We decided to use t-shirt sizes for this, which is quite generic and quite understood across for everyone, I think. And this again helps new contributors, but also us as a team. If you take a look at an issue that you want to work on, what kind of effort are you committing to, right? How much time will you spend on this? So again, we hope this will make contributing just a little bit easier for everyone. Next, someone from the community, Thor on Slack, brought this idea up of a hackathon. So there apparently are organizations out there or people out there who want to contribute to Dependency-Track, but who pretty much would start from zero, right? And he brought up the idea of having a hackathon where we as maintainers or we as developers of the project sit together with interested contributors, get them to know the project, tell them about the details, get them set up so they can work on the project, and also implement a few small issues with them or features. So essentially kickstarting them. And the question we have is there interest in the community for this? And also, where is the interest? Because if we end up doing this, it would be kind of bound to time zone constraints, right? Or to location constraints even. So if we get much interest from across the globe or across Europe or across the USA, we may have to do this remotely. But if this is centralized to, let's say, Germany or the US or even London, whatever, we may be able to do this locally as well. So if you have thoughts about this, if you are interested, please let us know. And we will also bring this up again on the next community meeting. And that is all from my side. I think, Vinod, you are next.
Thanks, Nicholas. Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I want to discuss about this thing, but apologies, I put the slides in the last minutes, and so I did miss some of the context. So Hades. Why Hades, right? Like, so Hades is the future version or the next major version of dependency track, version 5. So it is a highly scalable architecture. So anyone who has a use case with the scalability, they can use dependency track in that scenario. And it is also going to support high availability. So if you want to use with the, I don't know, CI use case or some other specific use case, you can still use it. And it is coming with the inbuilt support for vulnerability policies. I believe Nicholas has covered this multiple times in the previous sessions, and also some of the demos uh, team did. Like, yeah, so vulnerability policies is another important or major feature which can help you to do a policy-driven triaging or automated triaging or semi-automated, however you want to call it. And it supports integrity analysis. Integrity analysis is another feature where you can check if the integrity data of components is matching with your authoritative source, or if there is a change with integrity data, you may want to investigate it further if it is intentional or unintentional change. So that's also coming with the Hades, and it's coming soon. So yeah, we would like to, or at least as a community, we would like to have the Hades GA soon. We may need your help. But I also want to take it back a little back after saying this, like why Hades was there and what is the history behind. Firstly, I would like to use this opportunity to thank Citibank. So Citibank is one of the major contributor of Hades. In fact, Hades project was born at Citibank almost 3 years ago, or at least the initial idea, architecture discussion. And I would like to also use this opportunity to thank Steve and Nicholas to having those discussion, driving all those architecture decision and all. So yeah, so city want to have a solution that can be used for a city's vulnerability management use case. So that's how the Hades project was born, and city also um, allowed the team to build the Hades project as an open source first principle. So we didn't want something city first, then go to community. We developed everything in open, and we didn't want to hide anything from the community. So all Hades is open from the early stages of the code contribution, which I started bit over 1 year ago. So yeah, and yeah, as you may have watched the presentation from city team, the city is already using this in production. So even though we are saying it's not GA ready, it can be used in production. If it, if you are starting new with the dependency track, it may be the right selection instead of going with the version 4 and migrate to version 5 in, I don't know, in next couple of months, or I don't know what exact time frame we have to release the version 5. So, and also if you are using Postgres database, you may want to try or test it with Hades and see if there are any challenges when you are migrating from Postgres version 4 DT to Hades DT. So can you go to the next slide, Nicholas? Thank you. So how you can help us, how you can contribute, you can help us. There are so many opportunities and options to help. Like I think firstly it's with the documentation itself. We know that the documentation is slacking bit, like, and we need to improve it. That is going to be a chicken and egg issue, but anyway, if you can read the documentation and find some grammar issues, even you can update it, or if highlight that there is not enough documentation, we need documentation for how to set up or test it. Please go through the documentation and testing it, like so you can, even though it is bit complex architecture, one of the main idea or the decision in the early stage, we want to make sure that developers can run it locally. We don't want to complicate the architecture just because of an enterprise use case. So everything is bundled as a Docker compose, so you can is this the slide? Oh, sorry, Nicholas. Is it a different slide, or I think I updated another slide? No. Okay.
Wait, maybe
Anyway,
it's because maybe it's because I
okay,
started the presentation before. We just check.
I need some last minute update.
Yeah.
Okay, it is there. So can you go back the previous slide?
Ah,
Yeah.
not good
Previous.
with technique. With tech. Present
Maybe
you.
it's-
Does this work?
No, the one before that. Back button.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so you can see the last link which I put just before the meeting. So that is a link for you to try it locally. So feel free to try it locally first and test it. Go through the documentation and see if it is working, or the features and functionality is working as expected. And we do have an issue. Basically, we have two issues which I tagged last night as help needed. One issue is 860, which is the GA readiness issue. The another issue is some other feature request I made. Anyway, so yeah, that's the main two issues. At least we might need some help at this point. But yeah, so you can also help with the bug fixes. If you find any bugs, you can contribute the fix back. If there are any other features you would like to propose in the Hyades version, you can also propose it, so we can also incorporate that. Yeah, so that's technically contributing to Hyades, and there is one more slide which is, can you go to the next one? Yeah, so it's contributing to DT in general. So there is another way to contribute, like yeah. So we have a apps global AppSec Lisbon, which is OWASP Global AppSec Lisbon, is happening on June 24 and 28. And today is the last day to submit the CFP or Core 4 paper. I think you have less than 10 hours to submit if you are interested. So I just want to remind, sometimes, like me, some people prefer to do things in the last minute. So yeah, if you are still interested, please do submit it. And this is another way you can spread the message about Dependency-Track project, encourage the rest of the people to join the community. And yeah, so we will really appreciate if you can submit a CMP. And if you need any help with the CFP submission or the presentation materials, you can reach out to us. So we have a lot of common materials we normally use with the different conferences and presentations, so we can also help you. So yeah, that's pretty much from my side. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinod. Also for everything you're doing for the project. Thanks a lot from all of us. Alrighty, next Melba and/or Steve from Insights from Vulncon.
Would you like to go first?
Why don't you kick it off?
Okay, sure. So last week, there was a conference in Raleigh. It was actually have the shirt on right now. It was a combination of, I believe it was CVE and FIRST.org. And my main focus for attending was more on the VEX side. So a lot of the sessions I attended, the topic was VEX, and I was interested in understanding how the community, the industry was using VEX, hence the title VEX, 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 and more VEX. And what I found is the adoption difference between VEX and SBOM. SBOM, if we look at this, innovation adoption life cycle here, and I'm going to try to do I should request access from you, Nicholas, for me to write. Yep. That is quite the the zooming effect, right? So if we, where's this little pointer? There. Oh, go back, go back, go back. There we go. Thank you. So if we look at this right here, right? I'd be interested in seeing what the community thinks in terms of adoption of VEX versus SBOM. I see as SBOM being right around here, right? I'm seeing more and more companies adopt it not just generating it, but actually using it. Versus last year, I would put SBOM around here. Again, this is, what I see inside of IBM with our, suppliers, etc. Versus Vex, based off of this particular conference, I see Vex as right around here, right? So it's lagging behind SBOM adoption. And I was thinking about, well, why is that? And what I'm noticing is, in terms of clarity, people are still confused about the difference between VDR and Vex and OpenVex and CycloneDX and SPDX and CSAF, right? There was even a panel which Steve was part of that explained the different, I guess, formats of Vex. And CycloneDX, SPDX, CSAF, and OpenVex were supposed to be presenting. Unfortunately, there was not a representative for SPDX, but it was still confusion, right? Like even after the panel, people still weren't quite sure like which one they should use, which one was the right fit for them. And then once they would decide to use a particular version, okay, well, what tooling is out there to actually not only generate a Vex, but then how do you use it from a consumer perspective, right? So if a supplier gives me a Vex document, well, what do I do with it, right? So there's a lot of clarity that's needed around these different acronyms, and how to potentially use Vex for the greater good of the community. So I put two resources there for folks to look at, and all of the recorded sessions will be on YouTube once they finish doing the editing, so that's free for folks afterwards. But I would like to pull the community to see, are you using Vex? If yes, what specification are you using, or what format are you using? Are you just generating Vex, or are you consuming Vex? I'd be curious to know what the community is doing that's in attendance, because then that could help drive some of the work that we could potentially do in Dependency-Track on supporting Vex and whatnot. So I'll pass it over to Steve.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks, Melba. I also attended the first.org Vulncon, although life got in the way that week and I had to attend virtually. But it was the very first conference that they put on, and realistically, I mean, they did a phenomenal job. So well that they got such good feedback from this conference that they already scheduled next year's conference, which is phenomenal. It was very vendor neutral. It was really talking about what are the problems, not necessarily a lot of the chest bumping and whatnot that you get into the various camps. It was really about coming together to identify and solve the problems, which was refreshing. As Melba mentioned, there's some necessary clarity, I guess, on what is Vex. I mean, really, it's nothing more than an idea from CISA, who is not chartered to be a standards organization, although they kind of have this pseudo standard like thing called Vex. And then that pseudo standard like thing is then implemented in OpenVex, CycloneDX. It will be implemented in SPDX version 3 once that's released, and then CSAF. My kind of take on all this is that OpenVex is very minimal, right? It's less is more is kind of their philosophy. CSAF, that's an advisory format. It's actually a fairly decent and robust way to announce advisories. Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, others use that format. CycloneDX, while it does provide Vex, its support for vulnerabilities was really more focused on, how to reduce the time for developers to actually identify and fix things, right? think of the security team, or maybe you got a red team or an external pen test, and they give the developers a PDF. What's the first thing the developers are going to do once they see a PDF? They're going to give it back to you, right? Because it's not in their JIRA, right? They can't action on this. Cyclone DX, the vulnerability support in Cyclone was really designed to shorten that life cycle and get that information to the developers as quickly as possible so that they can remediate. And then of course Vex is obviously part of that, but it's not the major part of it, right? The interesting thing about Vex and the dependency track community, in my opinion, is that dependency track has had this Vex-like capability since version 4, dating back to 2021, before Vex was even a concept, right? The idea of just being able to audit, does this open source vulnerability that's in my product or application, does this thing actually affect my, my application, right? Because a lot of the times they do not. And I remember having a conversation with the co-founder of one of the SCA companies, and they couldn't kind of wrap their head around the fact that why would you have an auditing framework, kind of like you do with static analysis results, right? Why would you have that on like an SCA-like finding? And I kind of had to break it down for them on, well, this is why. And a lot of cases you can't simply upgrade, right? That's an ideal world, but not everybody lives in that kind of utopia. So hence the auditing functionality in dependency track has been there for 3+ years now. So it's interesting that we have a lot of dependency track installations that have had this capability for many, many, many years already, before Vex was a thing. So we theoretically, upon the tens of thousands of organizations that use dependency track, we theoretically have a lot of Vex-like data actually stored in all of our organizational instances of dependency track. The interesting thing to me is that while we do know that over 500 million components are represented in Cyclone DX every single month at a minimum, we don't know the amount of Vex that's actually being shared. We know the data exists, but is it being shared? Is it being communicated to people, organizations in your supply chain, not just for internal use? So that's a tricky metric to kind of discover, right? Because it's all kind of confidential information. And obviously dependency track is not going to, spy on you. That's not what it does. So I would be really curious to kind of get some feedback from the community on, is this are you sharing Vexes with folks in your supply chain? Yes or no?
I don't see any messages with
Yeah.
regards to that. But with that said, I believe this is the last slide, so we can go on to Q&A. And there were two in the chat. One was, it was from Val. I think that was the first one. I'm looking for it. I'm currently using DT410 with Postgres in the same Docker Compose. With 411, there's a change in schema for the Perl length size issue. If I were to upgrade to 411, what impact should I expect regarding the database change?
The migration will happen automatically when you start dependency track for the first time with the version 4.11. So everything should happen automatically, and you should not expect any major downtime or any downtime at all.
I'll need to try that. Marlon also asked if we had a list of features in 4.x that needs to be migrated to Hyades.
Yeah. So you want to take it, Nicholas?
No, please go ahead.
Now, I did post a comment in the chat as well. So yeah, ideally we would like to have all the features migrated to version 5. I think what we normally do is we wait for the DT, we call it vanilla DT or version 4 to be released, or a minor version of version 4 to be released. Then we create a backlog item in our GA tracker, then we backport it there like that. So then we distribute the work. But we don't necessarily need to wait for the version 4 minor version to be released. So if any of you is proactively interested, you can, like, sorry, Marlon mentioned already he would like to contribute with the Trivy feature. Like, so you can already create an issue in Hyades repo and start working on it. We don't need to wait for the official version to be released and start backporting it. But I think the aim is to support almost all features, right, Nicholas? I don't know if I missed something or any technical limitations.
Yeah, version 5.x is supposed to be a superset, not a subset.
Yeah.
But also regarding the backporting of unreleased changes, we don't do it because it's a moving target, right? We may still change things in version 4.x. And if we start backporting before 4.11 is released, that will get us in a big mess eventually. That's also why we wait for a release.
Yeah, it's one of those challenges. We have this backporting and also front. I don't know if front porting is the right word. Like sometimes we need to take features from Hyades to Dependency-Track. Like so, yeah, we should. I mean, once we release Hyades as a GA, we can avoid this kind of round trip and going back and forth. Like so, that's the ultimate aim. Yeah.
There's another question by Sanjeev. There's a plan to come up with a tool to scan and validate SBOM before using it for dependency tracker. And I believe there are two. One is CycloneDX CLI, but then there's one that Matt Rakowski had submitted, was an SBOM utility. So I think both of those do validation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think we have that. That's correct. I don't know if anybody got the link.
Yeah, we can put the link there. And then Val has another question. The first time DT is installed, needs to prepare the ground by downloading data from NVD and EPSS. NVD takes a while, whereas EPSS is shorter. That means that I cannot have EPSS enrichment unless the entire batch of NVD is completed. Would it be possible to fetch EPSS as first item so that I can have EPSS enrichment available sooner?
So with the current data model, it is not possible because the EPSS score and percentile are columns in the vulnerability table. It's getting a bit technical now, but essentially you have to have a vulnerability record before you can assign EPSS data. But on a related note, what we did in Hyades now is we, instead of using dedicated columns on the vulnerability table, we now use the dedicated EPSS table and then join as necessary. So you can download EPSS immediately and then have vulnerabilities dribble in one by one. And as soon as one of those is available, you can query the data. If that is helpful, let me know. Otherwise, I'm happy to elaborate on it more.
And there's another question from Marlon. Is there a goal for when 5.0 is released and how many 4.x versions are going to be released? Just asking because it's tricky to keep supporting two different streams.
Yeah, tell me about it. So it's kind of hard to say because, of course, this is still a community project, right? So giving hard deadlines or hard dates is tricky, if not impossible. All we can say is we know roughly what to do before we consider Hyades GA. We have this issue in GitHub where we collect all the things that we want to do. We are making progress. And I would hope that we would get this out this year without promising too much. And as to how many version 4.x versions there are going to be, kind of depends on how fast we are with getting things out, how big the tasks are that we are still to implement for 4.x, and how much help we get. I think there will definitely be a 4.12 still. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's key for folks to help us with Hyades, right?
Yeah.
The more people that can contribute to those issues that are blocking 5.0 release, right? Then we can get there faster.
Yeah, completely agree with Melba's point. Like, yeah, I think if you can help us sooner, yeah, maybe we may have 5.x coming out soon. But yeah, I think still there are some things we need to do in 4.x version before the migration, but we still need community help. So even start testing it, checking out the documentation, all those counts as a help, right? Like we need all kind of help from you. So please give a try. Maybe next time we can try to demonstrate how we can try. It's yeah, maybe yeah.
Next question is from Marlon. Marlon, you should just come off mute instead of typing. And this is something that I know I've talked to the team about, if there's any plans to support bomb lengths, one project, multiple SBOMs, because that very much is a real use case.
I don't think we have plans right now, other than we want to do it. So if you have ideas, please let us know, and we are happy to work with you on this one. As Melba said, there are many people interested in this, I think, so we will have support, I think.
And I think that's all the questions. If folks have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can take you off mute. Otherwise, you can put in the chat. You have a question, Vinod?
Question, I just want to add to that bomb link that there is also another community issue related to components health score. I think with the recent incident going on, I think it may be a question all of you get asked, like, it's a backdoor, what we can do, like, do we, so there is a interest from the community. So we had an issue to integrate at least OpenSSR scorecard data through deps.dev, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And that issue was blocked, not blocked, or yeah, the issue was failing because of the API access or the API availability. I believe deps.dev recently released their Perl API to fetch the score. So we may have that. Yeah, I was supposed to arrange a meeting between people who are interested for that health metrics or health score. So if anyone is interested, ping us in the group channel so we can add you all there and we can have an ad hoc meeting about how to progress with that work. Yeah. And I forgot to mention there was a Slack channel I created for Hades. Nicholas, sorry. So can you put the slide back up? I completely missed that. So we have a new Slack channel. It is specific to Hades. We don't want to pollute the current channel with any Hades specific questions. So if you have any questions or if you need any help, just join our Slack channel and you can ask anything there. Yeah, totally. That's it.
I don't see any hand raise. I don't see any other questions. Any last community thoughts? What you would like to see next?
I want to see how all of you are dealing with the ongoing issues. Like, if you need any help in general, like, outside dependency track, feel free to ask that as in the Slack channel. Like, you don't need to, just, yeah, if it's a challenging time, especially people on this call who is responsible to run DT or to manage vulnerabilities in their organization or backdoors or whatever. Like, so if you need any help in general or feel free to reach out, and yeah, happy to share what we can, but there is no easy solution for all this problem we have. So yeah.
Anything else from any of the panelists?
Just a reminder, please have a look at the Helm chart and please have a thought about the possibility of having hackathons. That's all from my side.
Going once? Going twice? Okay, so sold. We got 7 minutes left. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate all your time. We will put up the recording hopefully by end of day today. And let us know, please fill out the survey when you exit. Let us know how we can improve because we definitely do this for you all, not for ourselves. So thank you everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.